Ben McAdam is a profits coach with over a decade of experience advising businesses about their numbers. Today, he's talking to us about how to hit your growth and personal income goals and create super valuable businesses at the same time.
Hi there, welcome to this presentation about the 80-20 of profits, pricing and margins in subscriptions. There's only one technical term, I promise, and that's margins, and I'm going to explain it. But before I explain it, I'm actually going to describe what it's like if you've got your margins right or wrong, so that you can kind of see if that lines up with your business. So let's get into it after I talk a bit about myself, as all we speakers do. I'm a profits coach and a virtual CFO, so it's my job to help you understand your numbers, use them to grow your business, use them to hit your goals. But I'm also an entrepreneur. I've sold two of my own businesses, and I've usually got another one on the side, as well as this profits coaching stuff I do because I enjoy it. Got over a decade of results from my clients, including WP Buffs, who are organizing this summit. All right, enough about me. Like I said before we get into describing what margins are, I'm going to tell you what it's like if you get it wrong, so that maybe you'll recognize this in some of your own experience currently or with previous businesses. And it will help you if it comes up in future. You'll know, oh, I'm feeling this way, which Ben said was a margins problem. So I'm going to go check my margins. So if you get it wrong, you're going to fall asleep at your desk. Hard work, low income is one of the big symptoms of it. If you feel like you have to work really hard and you're not earning much money for it, that's most likely a margins problem. You'll find that you've got no money to delegate the work, no money to pay someone else to do it, no money to pay yourself, no money to grow. And probably no time to hire as well. You'll be confused. You won't know what to charge, whether your prices are high enough or whether they're too high, whether you could lower them. Not something I often recommend, but maybe that's the right course of action. But you won't know. You'll be confused if you haven't got your margins sorted. You'll be on an income roller coaster. I mean, this one actually looks kind of exciting. I think I've been on that one, this slide here. Anyway, you'll be too busy to get more clients because you're busy. You've got to do the work to satisfy the clients, otherwise they might leave. So you're busy doing. And then eventually the clients churn or they leave or finish up with you. And suddenly you're like, I've got to get another client. And so you're marketing, trying to get another one. And you'll keep going backwards and forwards between this if you don't get your margins right. Ultimately, if you get this wrong, you're going to feel stuck, or you're going to burn out, or you'll quit. It's kind of like this cat up a tree here, just sitting there staring. I'm like, I'm cool. This is totally normal. You know, it's putting the brave face on, or the proud, egotistical face, but doesn't know how to get down. And they're just stuck. And eventually the poor cat might even starve to death. Sorry, that's a little bit dark, but it's serious, this stuff with margins. I've seen a lot of people burn out that could otherwise have been very successful business owners. They've abandoned businesses that could work if they've just worked on their margins. So enough doom and gloom. Here's what happens if you get it right. You'll have a sense of abundance and choice. Like Luke here has so many awesome things to choose from, assuming he has a sweet tooth. Honestly, I'm not American, so I don't know what a butternut is. Anyway, I assume these are nice ones. But you'll have a sense of abundance and choice, which is a high quality problem to have. You'll know what to charge. You'll be able to price, make sure your prices are high enough without being too high that it drives away too many customers. Your income will keep going up. Income will be growing, so there'll be money left over to invest in growing the business, money left over for you to take out of the business for personal use, being able to pay yourself for all your hard work in growing this business. Ultimately, if you get it right, there'll be wealth because your income will keep growing. You'll have extra left over. You can reinvest, or you can invest in other asset classes or pull out. There'll be opportunities because the larger your business is, you can use it as a platform or a springboard to get you into other opportunities. You'll have pride in this business that you've created. That's where the lion thing comes in, pride. I don't know. Is that too much of a dad joke? I've been doing a lot of dad jokes lately. I apologize. I have a baby on the way. It's made it all worse. Anyway, yes, if you get margins right, wealth, opportunities, pride, rather than being stuck, burned out, and quit. So let me give you a couple of examples from clients of mine. Jeremy and Sadie, they had a business for a number of years before we had our first conversation. I got the full case study on my website, but the important bits that you need to know is that they had been running the business for many years, barely paying themselves minimum wage. They were definitely starting to get burned out from it. We had a conversation. I taught them what I'm going to teach you here. And then they sent me a message a couple of months later saying that instead of being in the red for the year, like they were before they talked to me, they were $100,000 in profit. So just by working on this margin stuff. So it's important for many reasons. Now let me tell you about George. This isn't his real name, and obviously this isn't his real face. I did it as like a protect the guilty kind of a thing. Because with George, he kind of neglected his business. He was doing other things, and his business didn't die. And the only reason his business didn't die is because, despite the fact he was pulling thousands per month out of this business that he was neglecting, is because there was enough money left to pay a decent-sized team to run the whole thing for him. And they ran it well. They were able to run it even though he sometimes wasn't communicative. They couldn't get in touch with him every day like they needed to. Like the business just ran, and there was enough money to throw at a couple of problems that came up because he was neglecting it. So if you get your margins right, it's not just like, oh, it's going to be all magic and sunshine. It's like it's going to save you from a lot of bad things that come up in your business. It's going to enable you to run the thing with very little effort because there'll be enough money to pay a team. So that's enough about how important margins are. Hopefully by now you understand what the stakes are if you get this wrong or if you get this right. So now let's get into the teaching part. There's 5 key concepts I want to share with you. I suppose the first one is I should probably tell you what margins actually are. It's about time for that. And as you can probably guess from the slide there, we're going to do some napkin math. Napkin math? I don't know. Is that a dad joke? I can't even tell anymore. Yeah. Anyway, knowing what margins are. So your margins are it's the difference between what you charge your customers for what you do and the cost of doing that thing for them. So if you're in a service business and you're selling WordPress support, for example, let's say you charge someone $100 a month for unlimited WordPress support. $100 is the price you're charging. Now let's say it takes, I'm going to pull an easy number out of the hat, $50 is the cost to pay your team to do it. So $100 is what you're charging, $50 is what it costs your team to do the work. No overheads like rent or insurance or subscriptions or marketing or payment processor fees or bank fees or anything like that. Just the cost of doing the work. $100 is what you're charging and $50 is what it costs you. So the margin is the difference between, which is $50. Now, if we turn that into a percentage of what you charge, that's $50 margin divided by the $100 amount that you charged, and that's a 50% margin. So that's simple calculation, and that's what margins is. And the importance of margin is that little gap in there is what you spend on everything else. It's what you spend paying yourself. It's what you spend marketing to get the customers. It's what you spend on any insurances you need, any admin team members that you need support. It's growth projects are all paid for out of that. Profits, paying down debt, building savings, everything ultimately comes from there. And you can't outsell that bad margins because if your margins are unprofitable, like really, really bad margins, and you sell more of them, you're going to send yourself broke or send yourself to burnout even faster. So really important stuff. So I've told you what the margin calculation is, and it's time for you to do the calculation now. You don't need to have the specific numbers in front of you. This is something you can do in your head right now. So let me walk you through that step by step. The first thing and the easiest step is the what you charge part of the margin calculation. So you can look up your pricing page if it's not top of mind exactly what you charge. If you've got multiple packages or like custom quoting that you do, pick the most common or something that's kind of close to the most common, and we'll use that for the whole example. So write down the price you charge, or type it into your computer or your phone or whatever. Actually, no, don't pick up your phone. It's very distracting. Type it down, or put it in somewhere. Write it down. Anyway, that's the easy part. The second part is the cost to actually deliver the service. Now, if you have a team and you know that it takes them 3 hours and the hourly rate is $20 an hour, then this is very simple. 3 hours times $20 an hour is $60. And you can write that down. For some of you, it might be a little more complicated. Maybe you don't know how long it takes your team to do something. If you don't, your margins probably suck, unless you got really lucky with really good staff. That's something you should go look into after watching this presentation, is find out exactly how long it takes your team members, or at least get it nice and close. Another thing that might make it a challenge to work this out is if you do the work yourself, if you don't have a team, or if you do part of the work yourself. It could be hard to estimate that. What do you pay yourself? Well, think about it. Think about the amount of hours it takes you, and think about what kind of hourly rate you would need to pay someone who could do it in that time. So you could do a quick search on jobs websites. You could actually post a job ad on a free website, and potentially, or talk to a job ad site. Some of them you can send them an email and say, hey, I'm looking for someone to do this. What kind of a budget? How much would I have to pay them? And they can give you that number. But yeah, we want to find out how much time it takes, what the hourly rate is, or maybe you pay someone a flat fee to do this thing for you, because we really need that cost side. It's important. So once you got the cost side and you've got how much you charge, you take how much you've charged, and you find the difference between that and the cost, and that's your margin. And then that margin, whatever that dollar figure is, or euro figure, or pound figure, depending on what country you're in, whatever that is, you divide it by the amount you charge and you get a percentage. That's what your margins are. You can check in your bookkeeping later and have a look at like your revenue lines versus your cost of sales lines. You can do a more accurate version of this calculation later. Like you can pick a recent client that you've worked for and you can look at exactly how much time it took. You can go do that afterwards, and I suggest you do. But for now, we need to know what your margins are, what that percentage is. I'm hoping you can pause this video before I go further and tell you what it is, to give you a chance to finish that calculation. But for now, I'm just going to move on. So you know what your margins are. Now it's time to work out what they should be. I have a rule of thumb that I use, and it's a fairly easy to remember rule of thumb. It's fairly simple. It's an amount that will leave plenty of money left over for marketing to get an increasing amount of customers and convert the sales easily. There's enough money left over to pay an admin team to help you run and monitor the business as it grows bigger and more complicated. There's enough money to cover all your overheads. There's enough money to pay you something decent, and there's plenty of net profit left over that you can spend on building up savings or paying down debt. So with this rule of thumb, it helps give you all those benefits of margins if you can get close to it. And I'm going to talk about how to get close to it later. So that's enough preamble. Let's talk about what it actually is. Now, I call it the rule of three. I've just taught you to calculate your margin as a percentage of revenue. And the ideal for that method is 67% or higher. But an even simpler way of thinking about it in your head is whatever the price you charge needs to be at least 3 times the cost, or the cost needs to be less than a third of the price you charge. I'm going to say that again one more time. So whatever price you charge, let's say it's $100, needs to be 3 times the cost of whatever it costs to deliver that service. So $100 price means $33 or less cost. $33 cost means $100 or more price. That way you've got a nice big margin in there to pay for anything. And I know there's a few of you that are going, what? How am I supposed to do that? There's no way I could charge prices like that. I'll address that in a bit. Just take comfort from the fact that I've had clients and friends and people I've talked to that start off feeling like that and actually get their margins to where they should be, and life does become miraculously wonderful. So The other thing I want to mention is this rule of 3 is actually a minimum. I mean, ideally you want to be looking at a rule of 4 or a rule of 5. So you've got, your cost is say $100 and you're charging $400 or $500, something like that. Because then there's tons of money left over for growing the business rapidly, for paying a team to run it for you. It does take time in some industries to get to a position like that. But for those of you who are panicking, I do want to mention that it's possible that with the team that you have, with the types of customers that you're targeting in the market that you're working in, it could be possible. It could be impossible to hit those margins. And so you need to change one of those factors. You need a different team, you need a different target, ideal client, or you need to be in a different market or a different niche. If you have questions about that, there's some way I think you can get me questions that come up through this presentation in the summit, or you can reach out to me through our website and we can talk about those. But for now, there are two main ways to fix your margins. You know what they are, you know what they quote unquote should be according to my golden rule of 3. There are two main ways to fix it. Because the margin is about the price and the costs and the difference between them, the two ways to fix it are raising your prices or lowering your costs. That extends this gap in between my hands here. You can raise your prices or lower your costs. And I'm going to deal with the price rise part first because that's what makes people nervous. And the good news is that losing customers is fine. I even like to imagine that this boat that the child is waving goodbye to, I like to imagine that this boat is a garbage boat. Like waving goodbye to those cheap and nasty customers that you really don't want to deal with. Because they're the ones that are potentially leave if you raise the prices, not necessarily your good ones. So, however, losing customers can be a good thing. This is a counterintuitive idea I want to give you. It's a quick version of it. I have a blog post that has a lookup table and a more in-depth discussion, but for now I just want to get the concept across. And that is, let's imagine that you've got $1,000 of revenue coming in per week, per month, per day, whatever it is, $1,000 of revenue coming in. And you double your prices, which is pretty dramatic. I have only rarely been able to convince people to do that. It's not always appropriate anyway. But let's say $1,000 of revenue now turns into $2,000 of revenue because you've doubled your prices. Except that half of your customers leave, which is a dramatically big number. Losing half of your business, losing half of your customers, it's a pretty scary idea. So now your revenue goes from 2,000, you went from 1,000, you doubled your prices, so it went up to 2,000, and now you've lost half your customers, so you're back down to 1,000 again. Thank you, Ben, for that emotional roller coaster. I hate you. This is the thought that goes through your head. If you've been on that roller coaster, until I point out something, you have the same amount of revenue as you did before, but you have half the number of customers. You have half the number of costs. Your business is a lot less complicated because there's less team members, less clients to manage and look after. You need less customers, so you don't need to spend quite so much on marketing, or you can spend the same amount on marketing and get even more leads than you need. So doubling your prices, losing half of your customers turns out to be a great strategy for massively increasing your profits and reducing the stress in your business. That's the counterintuitive idea. And I'm kind of pausing. You might need to run those numbers again. Like I said, I've got a blog post which actually has a lookup table. So based on your margins, if your margins are really terrible, you can dramatically increase your price. You can double your prices, lose 95% of your customers, and you'll still be more profitable. If you've got really poor margins, really thin difference between what you charge and what it costs you to deliver that, if that's 5%, that tiny little margin there, you can lose 95% of your customers and still be as profitable as you were because of all the overheads and costs and stuff that will disappear for you. So usually when I tell people this, they either sit there and go, hang on, that can't be right. But eventually they come to the idea of, okay, maybe I can raise my prices. There are other things you can do as to how you raise your prices that will make sure that you don't lose as many customers. So, for example, you can raise your prices for new customers only. If you do sales calls rather than having prices on your website, you could test a higher price. You could raise it 5 or 10% each time you sign up a client on a sales call. The next sales call, you can quote a 5% higher price or a 10% higher price, and just see where it really affects your conversion rate. You shouldn't be converting all of your sales calls. If you are, you're either filtering too hard or your prices are too low anyway. So losing a couple of sales calls doesn't mean that your prices are getting too high. Another way you can do it is you can reduce discounts. Is another way of raising prices without potentially scaring people off or making you too nervous to do it. Another thing, and there's a bunch more, but one more, you can put a low effort value along with your price rise. So an extra little service that you're giving everybody, and as you raise your prices, or you can just raise your prices a little bit each year. People are kind of used to inflation. But hopefully this whole section here about losing customers, that exercise with the $1,000 doubling to $2,000, losing half your customers back to $1,000 in revenue, but obviously being more profitable without the costs. Hopefully that is helpful, because usually I find that most of the way that people need to fix their margins is because they've been a bit afraid to raise their prices. So hopefully that helps. If you think seriously about this and implement it in your business, it can make a massive difference. The other way that you can improve your margins, apart from raising your prices, is with a little trimming of expenses. And I say a little because I want it to be only a little, and trimming because I don't want to be massive cuts. Like you see this picture here I've got of somebody trimming a big bushy tree. They're trimming like on the edges around the leaves. They're not going and hacking away at the stem, at the trunk, and the necessary main branches or anything like that. There was a story that the Japanese had this idea of Kaizen, continuous improvement, and in their manufacturing they were ridiculously good at like just incrementally improving the costs, getting more efficient. And eventually one company, relatively famously, but the name's escaping me right now, cut too far and the quality started suffering. And that's not what I want for you. I want to make sure that you don't make too many cuts that it starts to mess with the quality of the service that you're providing, or the ease of making your business work, because that can then drive away customers and they'll tell other people about how bad you are, and then it's a terrible spiral for the quality to be very poor. So we want a little trimming. So you can go through all your expenses, every month or every couple of months, and say, all right, do we actually need this? Do we need as much of this? Can we get something else without paying any break costs or for switching? You can go through and do those things on all of your overheads. That's one way to improve your profitability. And you can do that with some of the costs involved in delivering your service as well. Maybe you've got a team that does most of the work, but maybe there's some software or something else that they spend money on that helps them deliver the work, and maybe you could trim that cost as well. But usually in a service business, and that will be most of you who are watching this, the way to trim the cost side of your margin calculation is with team productivity. So making sure the right people are doing the job. The expensive people aren't doing stuff that can be done by more affordable or cheaper staff. Look at the total cost, not just the hourly rate when you're comparing who on your team should do a task, because sometimes the more expensive staff can actually be faster, and so they're actually cheaper than quote unquote cheap hourly rate staff who end up taking very long because they're not as experienced. So think about giving it to a different, delegating it downwards. Think about using automation. Software is often cheaper, faster, and more accurate than people. So you could potentially use that. Look at your processes, make sure that they're nice and efficient and help your team to be productive. Also, you can think about how fast your team members are working. You can think about, encouraging them to be more productive, not like, cracking the whip. Oh, I want you to do this a bit faster. But like good team members will appreciate the opportunity to improve and grow in their role and become better at their craft. And so if you're coaching them, or perhaps even like paying for a productivity training course or something, or leading some productivity thing inside your business for your team, a productivity challenge for a week or a month or something, that can help get your costs down. Or your costs might stay the same because maybe you're paying people a fixed monthly salary, but they're able to handle more clients. So you don't need to hire any more as your business grows. So, but with all that, like I said, I want to come back to this idea of a little trimming. Make sure that you're not chopping too much. You're not pushing your staff to get too much done, because they will burn out and they'll start taking time off, or they'll look for another job. So, make sure that you're not going too far in this direction. Usually I find that, when it comes to that margin, the price you charge and the cost to deliver, we're talking about maybe reducing the cost a bit, but we've just talked about raising the prices. There's more potential in raising the prices than there is in cutting the cost, because you can only ever cut the cost to zero, and not even that, because, you cut them that far and no one's doing the work but you on not being paid. So there's only so far you can bring the costs down. It's really raising the prices that's usually the bigger challenge. So that's why I spent so long talking about that one. So those are a few options for raising your margins. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked about what your margins are, as well as, the importance and what your life will look like if you get it right or you get it wrong. You now know what your margins are, as well as margins in general. You know what they should be. You've got that golden rule of 3. You know that there are 2 main ways to fix it. We talked about both of those: raising prices, and remember, it's okay to lose customers, do a price rise, potentially. And we talked about lowering costs in terms of maybe doing a little trimming on that side of the margin calculation. So now I want to think about what action you're going to take. It's all well and good just collecting information, but I don't really enjoy that so much as helping you take action. Transformation rather than information. So what are you going to do? Well, you've been and you've looked at your margins, and you know how they compare to my golden rule of thirds. You know that the golden rule of thirds is like a bare minimum. We'd ideally like even better margins than that. You know that the 2 main ways to fix it are raising prices or lowering costs. And in your case, what do you think you need to do? I want you to think about what you're going to do in the next week or the next month to improve your margins. Is it going to be a little trimming? Is it going to be raising prices? I want you to spend a few minutes right now and actually think about that. Don't get distracted by anything else. Just sit down with a pen and paper, or just think in your head, or open up a text document or something on your computer that you've been watching this on, and start thinking, okay, what are my margins and what am I going to do about it? Am I going to raise prices? What am I going to raise them to? Who am I going to raise them for? Am I going to lower costs? Which costs do I think I could lower? What kind of information do I need to see what my costs actually are, and whether maybe I could lower them? Don't get distracted even by the link to this blog post on the screen about how you can raise your prices and still be more profitable. Don't get distracted by that. In fact, I'm going to do a really quick exit and say, thank you for watching. My name is Ben McAdam from Profits Collective. Now go improve your margins. Thanks for watching.